Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Oh no, we're going to have to look up in the sky now, Steve. There's things falling out of the sky. Well, maybe not that dramatic or whatever, although I guess it did cause a bit of a stir, this whole thing with the Chinese rocket supposedly on an uncontrolled re-entry into the atmosphere. No one knows where it's going to land. Is it going to land on top of our houses, or is it going to land in the middle of the ocean somewhere? It's quite the stir that it's created, and well, we won't go down the media rabbit hole, I guess, for the purposes of this discussion, because there's a whole clickbait angle to this as well about how it's an immediate front page story, like the Chinese have got this thing falling out of the sky. They're not saying anything and all of that, but anyway, but the thing that was really interesting to me about this whole thing, which we were just talking about before we got on, was just the whole, I guess, admin procedures, all that aspect to it that may not be immediately obvious. I guess, we've got the history of from the 20th century where, they launched rockets into space, put men on the moon, all that sort of stuff. And then it's kind of become a bit routine in a way. We don't hear about launches anymore. There's I don't know how many tens of thousands or more of satellites orbiting the Earth. Obviously, they're going up. They've been going up, for years, and quietly, that no one's ever reported on, and there would have to be regulations around this sort of thing.
Oh, there are loads of regulations, and I mean, this isn't an unprecedented situation by any means. I mean, things tumble to earth all the time. I think the thing is, this one's actually going to get through the atmosphere. They've worked that much out. But 1976, the American Skylab. Was out of control. No one knew where it was going to land. They didn't know what it was going to hit, and as it turned out, it landed somewhere in Western Australia, in the middle of nowhere in Western Australia. So we've seen these sorts of things before, but all reports here are that the rocket, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, will probably land somewhere in the Pacific. So it's no big deal unless, of course, someone wants to reuse that rocket.
I guess a finders keepers thing, maybe, or maybe it's just the launcher has to go out and clean up the mess afterwards.
Oh, I think they paid big rewards to get Skylab back. I seem to remember someone getting $250,000, which was huge back in the 70s, for locating the main debris. But who knows? Maybe there'll be a race on to get to this rocket when it returns. But I think these days, it's the tech's all pretty standard, probably in every rocket.
But what about the fact that so much has been launched into space, sort of under the radar, and there's those. I think we've spoken before, those graphics that pop up from time to time of the Earth being basically, it's got another level of shielding around it, which is space junk, orbiting around the place. And at some point, I would think that they couldn't just keep launching stuff the way they have been.
Well, that's the ongoing discussion, and you pointed it up before. So theoretically, anyone in the age of CubeSats, which are the small, usually about 1 kilogram little satellite, anyone can put one up there to do their own experiments. It'll cost you about $30,000. And then on top of that, you almost pay an admin and management fee. So you'll have, in Australia's case, you have the Australian Space Agency. You've got NASA in the US and your JAXA in Japan. So every country that has a space capability has an administrative organisation, and you have to have permission from that country wherever you're launching your rocket to put it into space. Basically, they will go through every line of code in your satellite, and they will look at it from top to bottom and then approve it. And then, somebody has to maintain an uplink and downlink for communication. So this is where the space industry is growing, and it's hard to believe that probably for around $30,000 Australian, you and I could have a SciTech Culture CubeSat up there in space.
Well, that would certainly put our podcast into the stratosphere now, wouldn't it?
Well, that's right. We have our own secure link, and people could hook up to the CubeSat and download our podcasts. And wouldn't that be marvelous?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was actually Also, just wondering, just the international relations aspect to this. Obviously, the this particular story is essentially, a concern for many countries because it's it's not the CubeSat that's coming down. It's a 30-meter long, used up rocket coming from that was launched from a country, like on a country level, nation level. So, and I guess that's another aspect to this story, that when, say, something doesn't go right or can go wrong, it's not just about the country's responsibility. It starts becoming more of an international thing because, if it doesn't end up landing somewhere, like, it can only, well, I guess embarrassing is the lightest way to put it, but if a country launched something up into space and then its debris ended up in another country and maybe potentially caused some damage, that can't be a good look, I would think.
Well, we all know how insurance works. Somebody's got to pay. Now, space is very highly regulated, but space law is still evolving. And in Australia, actually, we have a number of groups that are leaders in space law, and they look at everything from, geopolitical standpoint, safety, admin, risk, etc., because everything that goes up into space is insured. Yeah. And, if it lands, anything that we send up lands in the wrong place, someone's going to have to pay. So there are lots of different laws. There are laws about protocol. There's laws, obviously, that are coming into play in this particular story about is the descent of this rocket controlled or uncontrolled? Does it matter? Is the communication there? There's a whole story behind this that probably, I would gather from the response that no one wants to shoot this rocket down because it's actually just going to land in the ocean. So, however, I guess it may be what the point of the story is to say is that if the rocket genuinely was out of control, that there's a capability there that nations would take to protect themselves, which really ultimately makes sense. You don't want really any of these, especially a 30-meter long rocket landing back in somebody's city.
Yeah, exactly. Armageddon style. Speaking of rockets, just wanted to touch on quickly, we mentioned before Elon Musk's attempts through SpaceX with his, reusable rockets, etc. And he finally got, SpaceX finally got a successful launch and landing of one recently. And that's another interesting aspect to all of this is that, it's another thing to be honest, I don't know how comfortable I would be with that landing rocket if I was actually a passenger on that thing. They'd want to make sure that it's working 100%.
I guess that's why they're testing it without people on board. I mean, this is a huge step forward, and I think this is the thing that, you're not going to have success right from the start. This is an unbelievable thing that you can send a rocket up and then bring it back down and land it. That was, growing up, and even probably 5 or 6 years ago, that was the sort of stuff that we imagined in science fiction. This is incredible that you can land a rocket vertically, effectively in reverse. Yeah. So, hats off to the team, there at SpaceX. This is brilliant. And I've got to say, I don't know much about their what inspires their design, but I love their designs because they look futuristic. They're big rockets, and they're doing stuff that people have never done before. And I think that's awesome.
It's interesting in contrasting those two particular stories and sort of broadening it out to, I guess, a bigger narrative around what space and going out into space is in today's world. Because I guess we went through the stage 1 process in the 20th century where it was almost like a government enterprise. there was obviously the Cold War aspect, so there was a competition between nation states to, be the first to do this or that or the other thing. And I guess that ran its course, and then we didn't really hear too much going on from that. But this re-energized sort of interest in going out into space. Obviously, there's still a government aspect, like the whole NASA stuff with, the Mars probe and all of that. But then there's other countries sending probes to Mars, I should say, not just stuff. And then you've got private companies that are throwing their 5 cents in to do it all. And it seems to be a collective effort to not just, like, we've gone past the point of, can we get someone into space? Can we get someone to the moon? And now it's more like, how can we stay out there a bit longer, stay out there longer term? What can we do out there longer term? This is the future, I guess, that science fiction has always kind of alluded to, and it seems to be getting, inch by inch a bit closer.
Look, if you look at what the reusable rockets are doing, there's no question that by the end of this century, space travel is going to be routine. There'll be a certain percentage of the population, albeit we'll have a huge population here on Earth, but you might find as many as 10 or 20 million people make this trip into space every year, which is, by numbers alone, that's huge. I mean, that's unprecedented. We know that by 2030, it's likely that there'll be a base on the moon and people will be permanently inhabiting the moon. So this is all part of that, And when you see, Elon's rockets blow up 3 or 4 times, while they're testing them, it's really easy to sort of have a kick at Elon, because let's face it, no one really likes him, I don't think. But you have a kick at him, but that's really very short term in terms of the way we look at it. What he and SpaceX are doing is unprecedented, and they are actually creating the ability for humans to travel regularly into space, and that means humans inhabiting space, areas of space, be it the moon, be it in Earth orbit, be it on other planets. And that is simply amazing. And it's something that I just don't think that while you see it happening or when you're there at these early stages, you really appreciate. I guess it would be like watching the Wright brothers fly at Kitty Hawk, and then, in the same breath being able to imagine, I guess, air travel as it was pre-COVID.
Absolutely. And that transition didn't take all that long at all, really, if you think about it. And I guess it's also a reminder that, for all this talk of, so much happening in the space area at the moment and how much is getting pulled together, what the ingenuity, the science behind making it all happen, it's you can kind of lose sight of the fact that this is actually really hard stuff to pull off. The idea that we basically have to recapture our biosphere, in effect, that we've grown accustomed to on Earth, what we've grown up with, and what we evolved on, and we have to somehow create it in a foreign environment that doesn't have any of that stuff. And I think people might lose sight of the fact that this stuff is just genuinely hard to do.
Oh, look, it's incredible. And on that, I don't think people very often realise that they still need to take oxygen up to the ISS. There's no closed loop system yet. And, people sometimes say, why are we going into space? Why are we trying to do these things? The technologies that will create closed loop systems, regenerative systems that don't require huge amounts of energy input and create waste, those systems, which are almost circular, will be developed for space, and those are exactly the same systems that we will be using on Earth to protect the planet and improve the environment in the future. And that's why space travel is so important, not just for the exploration, but for also the technology it will bring to make the Earth a better place.
Absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there. It's exciting times to say the least, and it's just good to see that so much effort is now being re-energized and re-put back into the effort to get out there, and also that so many are interested in doing it.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll get a trip at some stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Right at the end. All right. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.